hello and thank you very much to our two guest speakers for today. The topic of today is the power of foundations. How should foundations influence public policies? And we will have a very interesting discussion. It's going to be a US-France comparison in a way, and it's also going to be a deep reflection about the proper role of foundations, which are the main type of philanthropic organizations, both in France and in the US. The role of foundations to influence, suggest reforms for public policies. So our first speaker is Megan Tompkins-Stange. Megan is a professor at the University of Michigan in the US. She's working especially in the School of Public Policy there. And Megan has published a very important book in 2016 called Policy Patrons. And in this book, she studies the influence of large US foundations in policy reform, especially in the K-12 education. So Megan will start with a little overview of some of the findings of her book and her research on this very interesting topic. I just want to mention that Megan is also a visiting professor at ESSEC this year. We are very happy to have Megan for a full year. She's visiting us at the Philanthropy Chair. And our second guest, Delphine Lalu. We are very happy also to welcome Delphine. Delphine is the head of the AG2R La Mondiale Foundation and also head of the CSR policy of the group AG2R La Mondiale. She holds many responsibilities in the foundation sector. She's a board member of the Centre Français des Fondations, the French foundation center. And also she's heading the economic affairs section of the Conseil économique, social et environnemental. And in this role, Delphine is also representing the voice of foundations. As you may know, the Fondation AG2R La Mondiale is very involved in education as one of our key areas. And both Megan and Delphine will focus on education as a field for foundation work and policy reform. So thank you again for being there. Maybe I will now invite Megan to come to give her the first talk. So Megan, can you please hold the microphone because we are recording the session, if you don't mind. Right. Thanks a lot.
Merci. Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. And Delphine, I'm excited to learn from you as well. I'm going to be talking about, as Arthur said, a book that I wrote, came out about 3 years ago, entitled Policy Patrons. Sorry, I am a singer, so I start going like this, so just don't mind me. Policy Patrons, Philanthropy, Education Reform, and the Politics of Influence. So, to start out, I want you to consider a couple headlines in the past few years in the United States. States adopt national standards for their schools. I realize for people who are from France, this seems ridiculous because there's a national curriculum. In the US, the curriculum varies by state. There is no national curriculum. From the Wall Street Journal, Newark's merit pay plan begins. Also called differential compensation, merit pay for teachers who are incredibly high performing. And then the LA Times. LA Unified releases school ratings using a value-added method. So what do these three seemingly different headlines have in common? Each of them represents a major policy reform or innovation that was championed and often privately financed by a private philanthropic foundation. So the first case, trying to bring states together around, sorry, this is used to this, a common curriculum, a common national curriculum that was championed by Bill and Melinda Gates. The second one, Newark merit pay, championed by Eli Broad, who's here with our former Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. And the third, using a new evaluation system to tie students' standardized test scores to their teachers' performance, the value-added method, funded by both. So, I argue in my book that in the US, the education sector is probably the most impacted by the influence of private philanthropic foundations. And just to distinguish the scope of what we're talking about, private philanthropic foundations in the US are tax-exempt organizations. They are 501c3 nonprofits. They are closely held grant-making organizations. So they have a private board, and they don't run programs. They're only making grants. So this distinguishes them from public charities, things like the Red Cross and other nonprofits. And many of you may know, in the US, again, very different from France, we don't have a strong central state. We don't have a strong central welfare provision mechanism. And so this really increases the power of the civil society, of the market, and of foundations in filling in for these gaps. Okay? And traditionally, the role of philanthropy in the US has been idealized as providing a check on a monolithic state, providing alternative sources of capital for perhaps minority interests or things that fall outside the interests of the majoritarian constraint. Also, a source of private capital for being innovative, experimenting, things you don't want to necessarily do on the public dime with political constraints. And it's interesting, given the power of philanthropy in public education, because in the US, public education is unequivocally a democratically governed state function, but it's very strongly impacted. And this has especially been amplified in the last 20 years when we've seen a huge growth in foundations that have more than $1 billion in assets. And these foundations are disproportionately likely to want to do funding that's related to policy influence and advocacy. Okay? So that's what this looks like. Back in 1995, you see a small number of foundations that had more than $100 million in assets, and a smaller number of mega foundations in excess of $1 billion. You can see this has significantly gone up by 2010. Similarly, these are education funders that have assets of more than $100 million. You can see we're still calculating the data for 2019, but it's going up exponentially, especially when it comes to policy influence funding. And this is a really interesting core tension, because in the United States, there's been a history of controversy as to what the appropriate role of a private foundation is to the state. And there's actually been, over the last 100 years, since foundations were first formally incorporated, 3 different waves of scrutiny from Congress. And that culminated in the Tax Reform Act of 1969, which placed some pretty significant restrictions on what foundations can and cannot do politically. So in this way, foundations are a different type of 501c3 organization. 501c3 public charities can lobby up to about 20% of their operating budget. Foundations cannot do that at all. Cannot lobby, cannot electioneer, cannot be what's called in the legislation direct agents of influence. So, I mean, this phrase still gives a pretty wide scope of latitude, and so a lot of behavior goes on that might be called lobbying by another name, but instead it's framed as public education of the public, building political will, conducting surveys, this type of thing. And so what this has done, although foundations obviously continue to be very active and engaged in terms of what they're doing to influence policy, they're not transparent about it. It's disguised, it's often done behind closed doors, and it's had somewhat of a chilling effect on foundation transparency and also has really limited scholarship. Okay. So this brought me to the question that guided this book: how and why do elite philanthropic foundations seek to influence K-12 education policy? And the methodology that I used was a cross-case comparative analysis. I chose 4 of the largest US foundations by asset size. I conducted 60 semi-structured elite interviews. This is an actual term in qualitative research, meaning people who have significant authority or power to make decisions in their organizations. And this included foundation presidents at these 4 places, policy and program officers, general counsel. I also consulted with a number of leaders in national organizations with knowledge of the broader field. And importantly, and somewhat controversially, I guaranteed anonymity to all of the people in the study. By doing so, I sacrificed some detail and some granularity that might otherwise be desired, but none of these people would have talked to me if I had not given them a proverbial mask, right? So that's a trade-off I chose to make. I also did extensive archival analysis of each of these foundations, press reports, annual reports, all sorts of archival material related to their operations and values. And I also did an 18-month period of participant observation where I was embedded in another large foundation, not this one. And I didn't directly bring this into the book, but it informed my understanding of what questions to ask and what issues to raise. And that foundation remains anonymous for reasons I can discuss later. So the 4 foundations in the study are these: the Gates Foundation, the Broad Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, and the Ford Foundation. So all of these are in the top 20 foundations of all types of grant making. Gates, Kellogg, and Ford are in the top 10. Okay? So these are the largest foundations in the US. You'll see these 2 foundations, Gates and Broad, are both located on the West Coast, founded around the time of the first dot-com boom. Kellogg and Ford were both founded in the 1930s. Actually, were both founded in Michigan, my home state, and then later moved to New York. But 2 different eras from which these foundations were coming from. Okay? And I found that they have very different contrasting norms and values. Okay, so Gates and Broad are new. They have living benefactors. They really have been inculcated with Silicon Valley values. And I'll show you what I mean more by that in a second. But this tends to be interested in technocratic approaches, market-based reforms, entrepreneurialism, scale, these sorts of things. Whereas Kellogg and Ford, being founded in the 1930s, reflect more of a Deweyan era philosophy, the progressive era, focusing on education as a form of democratic and civic engagement. And they have very different levels of comfort with actually being involved in policy at all, right? So none of them are really supposed to on the surface, but they do about it differently. So Kellogg is definitely the most reticent. Someone said that I interviewed, we don't like to be out in front. Broad, and to some extent Ford, are very aggressive and assertive and quite unapologetic about it. We'll use all the tools available to us to advance our preferences. And Gates is also cautious, but recently has become a lot more forward. This is a line from Bill Gates. We want you to walk right up to that line, the line of legal liability. So the key themes, which I'll illustrate in a moment, that emerged from my analysis are organized around 4 different questions. How do these foundations manage their grantees? What types of partners do they prefer to work with? How do they frame the problems and solutions that they work on? And how do they evaluate their results? So this is a quote from a very high-level person in the nonprofit field. There are basically 2 kinds of foundations, and I found that to actually be quite true. So I developed a conceptual framework contrasting on these 4 themes: management of grantees, partners, framing, and evaluation. And I found that these 2 types of foundations more or less break down along these 2 different types. And this is a conceptual framework. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but there are qualities that correspond to each one. So let me give you some examples. Outcome-focused foundations tend to be centralized in how they influence policy. They are the architect of a strategy. They set goals. They enroll grantees to fulfill those goals, and they hold them accountable to incremental benchmarks and outcomes. And very top-down. Whereas field-focused is the opposite. Instead of the foundation being the architect, it is more a supporter of the work that grassroots organizations are doing, tend to give general operating support grants instead of program-specific grants, and tend to be more focused around supporting the people on the ground as opposed to making decisions at the foundation level. So the locus of control is different. So here are a couple illustrative quotes. This is someone from Gates. We treat our grantees as contractors. Pretty straightforward. Someone from Ford. I was not going to do what 95% of foundations do, which is come up with the answer. Types of partners that they prefer to work with. Outcome-focused foundations prefer to work with elites, or what they call Grasstops actors. So governors, state superintendents, elected officials, senators, representatives. And the idea is that by going straight to the top, you're going to move the policy very efficiently, quickly, and effectively. Okay? Opposite again in field-focused. They prefer to work directly with local communities on the ground, in organizations and as constituents. And obviously grassroots is a more familiar term than Grasstops. So again, this is someone from Gates describing a strategy for school reform. The first order of business was leveraging at the highest level the people who had the most influence. And in contrast, someone from Kellogg, any policy direction that grows out of our work has come all the way through the bottom and up to the top. Framing problems, outcome-focused foundations tend to like problems that are technical in nature. The answer is already known, and you know that by injecting a certain amount of resources, you will be able to solve the problem. So X leads to Y. If malaria is the issue, you give a vaccine, and you know that's going to work. Whereas field-focused foundations tend to approach problems that are more adaptive. And so I borrowed these two terms from Ron Heifetz at Harvard. And adaptive problems are also what you might think of as wicked problems, those of you who are familiar with that famous Riddle and Weber piece. Complex, multifaceted, hard to isolate a specific causal linkage as to X caused Y. This is someone from Gates. We're technocrats. We wish there was an app for that, referring to public education. And this is actually not sarcastic, so that's something else to consider. And then someone from Ford, it's about building a field as opposed to injecting a specific idea or a specific technical solution. So where outcome-focused foundations were much more technical, the field-focused foundations describe themselves using words like culturally focused, behavioral, humanistic. So different disciplines, different valued expertise. And finally, evaluating results. Outcome-focused foundations prefer quantifiable results, those that can be measured using quantifiable metrics. And field-focused are more comfortable with integrated results. And this is, again, something I've borrowed from Liz Shore at the Center for Policy Reform in DC. More comfortable with both qualitative and quantitative approaches. So a mix of both seeking proof that something works, such as you would in an experiment or a quasi-experimental design, but also accepting a plausible and defensible case for something working without having that causal proof. So our outcomes were to get public policies changed. Someone from Gates. And then someone from Kellogg. Rather than saying the victory was the policy, we need a more complete picture of all the things that work together to effectuate the outcome. And a corollary to that, increments with numbers attached is a preference for outcome-focused. One person from the Broad Foundation told me Eli Broad has to see the test scores rise at least 5% in 1 year to give money to a school. Whereas Kellogg and Ford were saying, we're going to look over it over 10 years' time. We're going to think about all the different aspects, the poverty, the mental health of those students, as opposed to tying to test scores. So very different approach. And again, while this is a conceptual framework, Gates and Broad tend to fall more into this category, and Kellogg and Ford tend to fall more into this one. It doesn't mean it's a one-size-fits-all, as I said before, though. So Ford actually does work with elites and with grassroots communities. Broad tends to do a fair amount of grassroots work. And in both cases, the foundations are adapting some qualities of the other approach. So Gates has started to try to talk more with teachers and parents and grassroots communities, whereas Kellogg is going away from what they call a heart-centered approach and trying to be a bit more business-like in the way they think about outcomes. So the terrain is shifting. I just wanted to pull out one quick example of the Grasstops strategy and how this manifests in actually influencing policy. So this is a quote from the Broad Foundation's annual report in 2009. It says, "We feel the stars have finally aligned. With an agenda that echoes our decade of investments, the Obama administration is poised to cultivate and bring to fruition the seed that we and other reformers have planted. Alignment, convergence of the government and the foundation. And here is a quote from a very high-level person at Gates who told me, "There was this twinkle in the eye of our leader when the Obama administration's education policy framework came up. And they said, aren't we lucky that the administration's education agenda is so compatible with ours?" And then there came the twinkle, right? You know, we wouldn't take credit out loud, even amongst ourselves, but you know, the twinkle, okay? So an implicit acknowledgement that, oh yes, we're influencing policy. We're not gonna say it out loud. But wow, we were able to align our agenda with the government's, or actually perhaps the causal arrow goes the other way. And so the implications from this are really interesting right now. I found that the outcome-focused approach generally leads to shorter-term impact. It makes sense. If you want to get a specific policy changed, you're going to marshal all the resources at your disposal, you're going to move fast, you're going to work with the people who can get the policy passed quickly. This is someone talking, who is at Ford talking about Gates and Broad and what they had done. A national core curriculum was like the third rail. It's an expression meaning the part of the electric rail that you can't touch, it'll get electrocuted. You can't touch that in American politics. But we now have a common core, and we are slowly moving to a common protocol for teacher evaluations. These were unthinkable things prior to the influence of Gates and Broad. Someone else talking about Gates and Broad, a national leader. "I'm amazed at what they've done. Look how education is a high priority item in this country, and it's singularly because of Gates and Broad." And so they were able to incorporate the reforms that they preferred, the model of social order that they endorsed, into national policy. Very effective. But in some senses, they won the sprint but lost the marathon, if you will. In 2016, there was a huge backlash against many of the reforms that the government had adopted into national policy that were championed by the outcome-focused foundations. There was the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was essentially a referendum on the very policies that these foundations had advanced for 10 years, including national core curriculum, teacher evaluation standards, and these sorts of things. Additionally, about 30 governors decided to pull out of the Common Core Compact that they had originally signed. And there was a huge parent response against the use of standardized test scores to evaluate teachers. In some states, as many as 20% of parents opted out of their students taking the mandatory standardized tests. So a huge groundswell against this. And Gates issued some mea culpas. They said, this is the CEO, "We missed an early opportunity to sufficiently engage educators, particularly teachers, but also parents and communities. This has been a challenging lesson for us to absorb, but we take it to heart." Melinda Gates, "Community buy-in is huge. It means that in some ways you have to go more slowly." When I read this, my brain starts exploding because it's such a departure from, the past 10 years. And just last fall, Gates began deliberately moving away from a top-down approach. Instead of, they're actually scrapping their work that they did on teacher evaluation and Common Core standards, and instead they're moving towards locally driven solutions identified by networks of schools working together. Sounds a lot more like a field-focused approach. And whether that's symbolic rhetoric or an actual shift remains to be seen. But they also have started bringing a lot more former teachers on board their staff, whereas primarily it was managerial professionals with MBAs prior. Okay. So just to end on this quote, what's the balance between outcome-oriented and field-focused? Because I think we probably all agree you need some of both. Here's a quote from a high-level person at Gates talking about this very challenge. "How do you establish a bottom-up versus top-down mix? It's a puzzle we've never resolved, and it's very tricky. At the beginning, we're too top-down, but bottom-up seldom came up with breakthrough thinking, the higher risk, what's possible without constraints types of ideas. The big think things come from a tight group of people with a blank sheet of paper." And then here's someone else who's a very high-level person at Kellogg. A bottom-up approach is a more effective way to do policy change in philanthropy. In the long run, you need to have the democratic element to make it stick. And so this brings up a couple important questions about the role of elite philanthropy in a liberal democracy, which I'm going to leave for the discussion if you guys want to talk about it. How much power should a private philanthropic foundation have to influence public policy? Another person at Gates. We have this enormous power to sway the public conversations about certain policy issues and mobilizing lots of resources in their favor without real robust debate. It's striking to me, actually. So on the one hand, maybe it's good to have a type of institution that is unfettered, again, by the median voter, that has the risk capital and the ability to fund things that are innovative and experimental. But what's the balance with the fact that these institutions have very few meaningful accountability mechanisms and are actually deliberately circumventing the process of democratic deliberation that is underscoring our public institutions in education? So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Megan, maybe we can take just 3 to 5 minutes for clarification points on your presentation. We will have a longer debate after Delphine's presentation, but we usually take a few questions. So if you want to ask Megan a question, please raise your hand about her presentation or her work. That's a good moment. And can you please introduce just your name briefly before your question? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Louis. I just have a question. At the end of writing your book, did you come up with any type of solutions that could be implemented in order to, as you, yeah, exactly.
I keep forgetting. I do offer some solutions talking about ways that foundations can be more accountable to the public, including having requirements to have boards that are more representative of the public or the communities that they are speaking for or active in, these sorts of things. Traditionally, though, in the US, there's been a real lack of political will to constrain foundations in any way. Unlike France, philanthropy is actually quite revered in the US until just the last 2 years when we've had a huge critique of it. But the idea is that it's the very lack of accountability that enables the foundations to do the things they want to do. So all of the things I propose are quite theoretical. I don't know if they would ever be actually engaged in practice, but I am seeing evidence of that in some of my research here and there. So I'm betting that there will be more of that debate in the near future. So check with me in a year or two, and I'll have a good answer.
Hello, thank you very much for your intervention and what you do. I would like to talk about the role of elite philanthropy in the democracy. There are journalists, a French journalist, who wrote a book about the foundation of Bill and Melinda Gates. The title is, I will take my phone because I forget it, The Art of False Generosity and Philanthropy. And I'm concerned about the power of this foundation because they have lots of money and they maybe not invest or support good initiative or innovation, but more their way. I don't know if... So what is the solution? Yeah, and what is the solution about that?
It's a really great question. So what is the role of wealthy people who have access to elite channels to advance their own preferences about the appropriate models of social change? And that's the question that keeps me up all night, right? Think about it this way. So the Gates Foundation, how many people do you think are on its board? 3 people. Bill, Melinda, and Warren Buffett. Okay? And that's totally fine. It is a privately held corporation. It is a family foundation. It is not a public entity that needs to be accountable or open to 15 people from the community. And that's fine unless, again, you're concerned about the extent to which they have amplified voice without corresponding mechanisms of actually being responsible to people. They don't have the tether of the vote. They don't have constituencies that can vote them out of office. They're not offering a product that the market can reject or embrace. So they're really a unique kind of power. And I think that's a main question I think that a lot of folks in the US are now struggling with, especially as there's been a debate and a big critique around the fact that philanthropy is inextricably linked to the existence of wealth inequity. And we have huge wealth inequity in the US. So should these philanthropists who built their wealth often on industrial fortunes or perhaps exploitative practices, should they turn around and then be able to, through their grant making, advance their own priorities without the debate from the public? So again, I don't have an answer, but I think about it all the time and I'll continue to.
Before handing the microphone to Delphine for the second presentation, a very quick and last question maybe, Laurence.
Thanks, Arthur. Thank you so much, Megan. Really interesting research and presentation. My question is, how would you define policy-related funding? Where does it start, as opposed to maybe community-based projects and so on?
It's a really good question. It's actually something I struggled with quite a bit as I was starting the book. Is when I initially began researching this, because this was originally my doctoral dissertation. I try not to tell people that so they won't run screaming in horror. But originally, I was conceptualizing of policy in a pretty discrete way, whether it's like passing laws, legislation. But that's not what it is at all, because I found that that was just not something I could understand given the extent to which things were hidden and recategorized and reframed. So the definition that I used is any funding or activity that is related to influence public will, build coalitions towards having laws and policies changed, and having to do with advocacy for specific goals that influence the public realm. So it's a broad definition, but it's intended to be broad so I could capture all of the nuances and the things that might otherwise be described as just lobbying, those sorts of things.
Thank you. Again. And now Delphine, if you want to join us.
Thank you very much, Megan. I'm going to be very French in that exercise because, there are 3 sentences very heavy and very hard to read. So please forgive me because, I'm being like a fresher into this work of speaking in English about the French educational system. And it's okay, good. Thank you very much. Is there anyone in here who speaks no French at all? Okay, I will try to do my best because I need to practice. I hardly speak English in my job. Okay. So, after your brilliant demonstration, it was so short, and I'm so in a hurry to have this discussion with you because what I was feeling about the Bill Gates Foundation, well, the Gates Foundation, is that I feel like they were the freshers in the story. And I was wondering whether they had an aim, a specific goal. I heard nothing about the mission and the vision they could have on the content of the policy making they were aiming at. So I was really wondering whether they have some sort of reflex, like the entrepreneurial reflex, which I'm not completely sure that all entrepreneurs have the same reflex. So that's the first point. And the second point is that the freshest week of the Gates Foundation lasted 18 years. It's a lot of time, lots of money, lots of time, and I think it's a bit of a pity. And I was very interested into what you did not say about the Kellogg and Ford Foundation, which are centenary foundations, and I would be very keen to know about how they did influence the policy making and the good policy making, like how all stakeholders at the national and local levels contribute with on a long term, contribute to change, to make the social change. How can we measure, tell the story of that? And I would be very, very happy to have this exchange with you. So what about me? I mean, where do I stand? I'm representing a very, well, not small foundation, but a very, very, very small foundation compared to the 4 foundations you were talking about. And in fact, we need in Europe to go in Germany to find the equivalence of the 4 foundations you were speaking about. There is no foundation in France, no one, who can be compared to the one you were discussing about. So that's one point. The French system is very different, and we are fighting. We are fighting for the foundation become bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger, and they could find their place. They find their good position into our system. So my foundation is it's not my foundation. I'm not really the head of the foundation. There is a board with 33 people. So we are very a good foundation compared to the Gates Foundation, because we are 33 and they are 33, representing all the stakeholders of the company, the shareholders and the stakeholders. And also, we don't have a lot of money to give, to allow, but we try to organize the way we work by taking into account what the public services and the associations did before us and on the side of the foundation. So I just, you know, we don't care about what the foundation does. What I just can say, we invest quite a lot into the educational field, and we have focused for the last 5 years on 2 primary schools. So it's more than 1,365,000 euro spent on that field in 6 years. And on that subject, in that subject, you have 500,000 only for one town in Seine-Saint-Denis, which is Lille-Saint-Denis. 500,000, which is a lot of money. When you know Lille-Saint-Denis, you know it's a lot of money. When we started to work into on that field, the first 5 years of the foundation, we thought it would be easy, because we all are parents or ancient students, and so we know everything about education. Anybody in that country has something to say about the national educational system. Anybody knows better than the state himself. So we did exactly as the others. We said we're going to be the king of the story. We're going to give money to social entrepreneurs, good associations, for innovations into the educational field. Even myself, I thought, well, you know, the educational system in France is not innovative. We, as a foundation, we are more innovators than the French educational system. After 5 years, we discovered that we did nothing. Well, in fact, we didn't know what we did. We just gave money, and we had no idea of the story about that money and how this money was really useful to the people who just got it. So what did we do? We have decided to frame a way of functioning, and we have decided to organize things. But this is the operational framework. First of all, we decided that we didn't know anything about education. And that when you are a foundation, when you are a family, a citoyen, no matter who you are, when it comes to speak about a field of general interest, you need to take a little bit of time to get to know better what is done by the state, the public authorities, and by the actors in the private sector. You need to take a lot of time to understand, to make the research, to listen before defining the mission, the vision you have for the sector you want to help. What about the système éducatif et social français? Is our system one of the best of the world? Yes, of course. Yes, of course. No, I really, we have a wonderful French national, social and educational system. It is wonderful. it has succeeded. It succeeds for 2/3 of the youth. The big problem is the 1/3, 30%, between 20 and 30% of the youth in the system who are more and more isolated, less and less educated. So we have a French system who is really successful for the 2/3 of the population, and the more and more successful, but less and less successful for the young people living in suburb areas, specifically, and with parents with social and economic difficulties. I'm not telling you anything about the French system, but really, it took me a lot of time to understand how the French system is organized. And it's not because I am French that I know how the French educational system works. That's very important. And mainly, most of the foundations I know in France have absolutely no idea of how the complete system is working. It's a bit of a problem. I'm not speaking about the Fondation de France because we worked with the Fondation de France, who was like really on avance, had like 10 years of advance about the system, and that's why a small foundation work with consultants and people in the Fondation de France to take a little bit to go quickly. You were saying that in the US the state is weak. In France, it's not only the state which is strong. It's the education Ministry of Education in France is strong. It's the state into the state. So the organization of the Ministry of Education is incredible. It is just incredible. With this ministry, you have a complete, masterized everything at both a national and a local level. Contrary to what many people think, the French system is not only centralized. It is both centralized and very decentralized. And this is a framing, a big picture, which is very interesting to analyze, because it is working. Secondly, we discovered when we were, after 2 years, that the French system is, first of all, innovative. There are so many innovations into the French system, educational system, that the problem is not to create more innovation, contrary to what Foundation thinks. The problem is to organize these innovations, to analyze them, and to help the teachers to make these innovations more efficient. Alors, efficiente et pas efficace, which means it has to do with the relationship between the investment you give and how it costs to the teacher, to the community, and compared to the result you get. So there are many innovations in the system. So most of the foundations, they found new innovations. I say, what for? What's the point? What's the point? The third thing about the educational system is that it doesn't. It is linked also to the public authority, local public authorities, and so you have a problem of governance of the whole system, which is very hard to understand for the foundations, for the parents, for everybody in the area, even for the state itself, even for the minister. Because in France, the third thing we discovered is that in France, you have a Minister of Education, a Minister of Social Affairs, and many ministers who do not talk together. And also, you have two sorts of policies. In France, you have the national, universal policies, politiques de droit commun, which are universelles ou catégorielles. I don't know how to say that, focused like on catégorielles. That's the biggest amounts of the budget are dedicated to these universal policies de droit commun. And on the side, you have contractual policies called the politique de la ville. And there is a big problem is the articulation between these two types of policies. And foundations as us, it is very difficult for us to understand how these different politics work at a national level and at the local level. So it is difficult for foundation to find out where its euro is the best efficient compared to these budgetary policies. I could speak a lot about the system. I'm not going to do that. You will get the PowerPoint, and also you will get an article that I wrote for for a very big foundation, Italian foundation, which 300 million euro to spend in 4 years in Italy to save Italian children. So the thing was, we want to save Italian children. How can we do? How can we understand what the French do, the Dutch do, and we were trying to help this foundation to do something appropriate. So I'm not speaking of the social system, but you need to have in mind that the social system in France is really into relation with the associations. Foundations in France are nothing. It's very new. We have 5,000 foundations in France. Only 3,500 are very active, and there are 300 foundations who represent 75% of the budget. It's nothing. It's nothing, and the whole budget is nothing. So the foundations are very new, but there is a very strong tendency, and we see that it's growing. In France, we have the associations, and there is a link, and I should answer the question by taking into account the strong work of influence of the associations. First of all, the Association d'éducation populaire, who were the compagnons de route of the educational system. The teachers in the system, in the public systems, are very often also volunteering into these local associations or national associations. And there are links grâce à l'enseignant, the teacher, and especially in primary school, the teacher benefit from a complete freedom of la liberté pédagogique. The teacher does whatever he wants to do inside the classroom. And the teacher is many often an innovator, because he tries, like doing the cook, doing the cook, he does what he can do to make the child succeeding. And many teachers, they develop their ways, their creativity, their innovation, pedagogical innovation, thanks to their involvement into the association. I'm speaking about history, because the whole associative sector of education populaire and even the teacher, they moved a lot. And so the France of today had nothing to do with the France 20 years ago. So we are a little bit into a momentum where there is a culture of innovation and of involvement inside the teachers' community, which is really evolving, and maybe something is we're losing something at the moment. And that's why the foundations have some sort of responsibility when they want to work into the educational system. The first responsibility, to my concern, is not only to speak to the minister, because there is one thing very important in France. It is so easy to speak to the minister. So easy for the foundations to speak to the minister. It's the best, it's so efficient. It costs nothing. And no matter the minister, I will say that with any minister of the French ministry. In the last 50 years, it has always been very easy to speak to the minister. It's less easy to speak to the teachers and to the administration and to the whole part of the administration. And that's why it's very important to know very well the relationship inside the state, which is in the state. You know what I mean? And the question is, what for? What for? What is the objective of the influence? And if you consider that we have to influence also new partners for the last 15 years, which are the local authorities, it makes things very harder. So for a foundation, what happened? The massification of teaching and education is a success. It's completely successful. I told you, we have a problem for les filles qui réussissent mieux que les garçons. So boys have a problem with la réussite scolaire. Le nombre des élèves qui sont en très grande difficulté est en hausse, et c'est ça qui est le plus préoccupant. Et les difficultés, that's the problem. The difficulties, they have more and more difficulties to integrate the knowledge. So we can see that the difficulties are deepened. When there are difficulties, they are deepened. So that's the objective. That's the problem. That's the point. The question is why? The question is why? You have the best social system, you have the best educational system. How can we have many levels of policies, national, local, we can do anything. We have a great evaluation system inside the ministry. Why? How can we understand that it is not working for 20 at 30% of the population? And we know the figures, we see the trajectory we've been seeing that for the last 15 years. It's le rapport Tello en 2004, sous Luc Ferry, said things which are still true and worse. And the answer is we have many evaluations. We have too many evaluations. That's the other point. The foundations who wants to evaluate. Nonsense. The ministry have so many evaluations, quantitative, qualitative, all of it. The problem is, what do you do with evaluation results? Where is the political decision? And who is the person who can decide? And that's the cue, and this is the thing where I would like to work now in the next months, is the problem is this mauvaise articulation entre les politiques de la ville et la politique scolaire, éducative. Et what I didn't tell you, but we have two problems, is that les décrocheurs. Alors, I'm not speaking in English because I don't. Okay, thanks. The décrocheurs. We did a wonderful job. On a baissé de 150 000 à moins de 100 000 en 4 ans, parce qu'ils ont mis en place un programme, un dispositif qui fonctionne, qui implique non seulement le secteur public, mais aussi l'ensemble des acteurs privés à l'échelle de territoire. Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont analysé? La plupart des décrocheurs, donc on a réduit le nombre de décrocheurs, mais qu'est-ce qui est ressorti des analyses? 50% des décrocheurs en 6e ne maîtrisaient pas les fondamentaux. C'est-à-dire que ça fait des années qu'on travaille sur le décrochage, et grâce à la Fondation de France d'ailleurs, c'est la Fondation de France qui a la première dit attention, il faut traiter la question du décrochage et la traiter au moment du collège. Et ce que la Fondation de France a fait au moment du collège, ça a permis d'élaborer des éléments du dispositif national. Et après, on s'est rendu compte que c'était à l'école primaire qu'il fallait intervenir. Eh bien, 17% des enfants ne maîtrisent pas le français, la langue, en entrée en 6e, 20% les mathématiques. Okay, je vais vite. Ces chiffres-là, on les connaît. Tout le monde les connaît, si on travaille un peu et si on prend les documents qui existent. Au CFF, on a un cercle éducation. Oui, c'est bon, Mégane, je continue en français. Ça ira plus vite. On a un cercle éducation au CFF, et notre objectif avec le cercle éducation, c'est de mieux s'organiser, déjà, de mieux comprendre ce que font chaque fondation, et de faire monter en puissance, c'est-à-dire en connaissance, les fondations pour qu'elles comprennent mieux cette question éducative, pour améliorer leur façon d'intervenir. C'est ça notre objectif. On a fait une étude sur les 500 fondations françaises qui interviennent dans le champ éducatif. Cette étude dit un certain nombre de choses, et à ma grande surprise, quand on regarde... Alors, elle dit quoi, cette étude? Que les fondations françaises soutiennent plutôt les écoles et les associations, donc ça c'est bien, qu'elles s'inscrivent en gros dans le cadre général de l'action publique, mais elles n'ont pas beaucoup de relations contractuelles avec l'acteur public. En général, elles travaillent plutôt avec le niveau très local, Ça, c'est un premier enseignement. Il n'y a pas de contractualisation systématique avec l'acteur public. Maintenant, si vous regardez les plus grosses fondations françaises, elles sont toutes en relation étroite avec le ministère, pour de bonnes raisons. Et l'enseignement que je trouve sidérant, c'est quand vous regardez les thèmes d'intervention de ces fondations, seulement 17% interviennent sur l'éducation aux sciences et 20% sur la maîtrise de la langue. Alors, vous avez la musique, les arts, ça c'est dans le top 3 des sujets d'intérêt pour les fondations qui agissent auprès des enfants. Il y a toute la sphère du renforcement des skills et des savoir-être des enfants, ce qui est fondamental. Hein. Je n'ai pas de jugement, c'est très important. Mais le cœur du problème, c'est il n'est pas traité. Et il n'est pas traité pourquoi ? Pas parce que les fondations n'ont pas seulement lu les rapports d'évaluation du ministère, mais parce que dans l'organisation de la réponse sur le terrain, ces deux sujets, l'éducation aux sciences et la maîtrise des langues, sont des domaines réservés, d'une part, de l'action pédagogique des professeurs, et d'autre part, nous ne trouvons pas beaucoup, à part une association, enfin j'exagère, mais qui a une structuration très massive, et qui a été d'ailleurs totalement soutenue, portée, encouragée par la Fondation Bettencourt-Schuller. On a une association coup de pouce clé, peut-être on pourrait mettre la FEV aussi dans cette catégorie, qui a décidé d'intervenir sur des fondamentaux en lien avec les enseignants. Et la clé, elle est là. C'est-à-dire que dès lors qu'on veut intervenir sur le besoin fondamental de l'enfant et qui est repéré par les évaluations, il faut impérativement se donner les moyens de trouver les acteurs sociaux qui interagissent avec qui ? L'enseignant et le parent, qui sont les deux acteurs responsables au premier chef de la réussite scolaire. Et du coup, en termes d'influence, pour nous, à la Fondation, l'acteur le plus important, c'est l'enseignant et son inspecteur. Alors, c'est là où il faudrait vraiment que ce serait intéressant d'avoir une réflexion, et au sein des fondations pour l'éducation, et vraiment, je pense qu'il faudrait arriver à traiter cette question de l'organisation du système et revoir, croiser les chiffres, les modalités d'intervention de l'acteur public social, pas éducatif, et de l'acteur fondation, privé, pour voir si nous intervenons aux bons endroits du système et selon des modalités culturelles en termes de contractualisation, de négociation adaptées. L'enjeu dans notre pour moi, enfin là c'est un avis personnel et je vous donne des pré-résultats de choses que je voudrais qu'on écrive l'année prochaine à la fin de l'expérimentation sur l'île Saint-Denis, c'est l'enjeu, il n'est qu'un enjeu de gouvernance, premièrement, et deuxièmement, l'ESSEC l'avait pointé, à l'époque on avait reçu Kevin André dans le cadre du cercle, quand on avait construit le cercle, c'est la formation au management d'équipe. Alors peut-être je caricature son travail, mais j'avais retenu ça. Voilà, j'avais retenu ça en tant que praticienne. J'avais trouvé génial cette idée, d'ailleurs c'était cohérent avec le rôle de l'ESSEC, consistait à dire tout repose sur la dynamique d'équipe au sein de l'école, autour de l'élève. C'est tout ce travail, comment on respecte l'enseignant, sa liberté pédagogique, les fondamentaux qui font la force de notre système. Parce que sans liberté pédagogique, il n'y a pas de neutralité, les grands principes de l'éducation nationale ne sont pas nécessairement respectés. Et deuxièmement, c'est bien la liberté pédagogique qui permet à l'enseignant d'innover sans avoir à rendre des comptes au maire de la commune, ni à son inspecteur, ni aux parents, ni à personne. Son métier, c'est de faire la cuisine avec les élèves qu'il a dans sa classe. Voilà. Eh bien, comment faire pour, tout en respectant cette liberté pédagogique, mettre en place les moyens qui vont permettre à l'enseignant de progresser dans sa pratique par la dynamique d'équipe, laquelle dynamique doit être organisée et nécessite un vrai travail de management. Et donc on a là peut-être deux idées, et une troisième idée qui n'est pas du tout agréable à entendre, et quand les gens me connaissent depuis longtemps, vont être assez sidérés. Moi j'ai radicalisé c'est un mot qu'on n'utilise plus en France, mais j'ai vraiment radicalisé ma position sur le soutien aux associations par les politiques de la ville dans le champ extrascolaire. On a vécu avec la dernière réforme des rythmes scolaires des choses complètement incongrues, totalement inefficientes, parce qu'en fait, l'argent public des mairies, des sociales, a été utilisé pour financer des associations qui n'étaient pas compétentes et jamais reliées à l'action pédagogique et au projet d'école, qui est pourtant un cadre imposé par l'acteur public, jamais relié. Et les associations passent leur temps à dire, pour se justifier, que c'est les profs qui ne veulent pas d'elles, mais ce n'est pas vrai. Ce n'est juste pas vrai. C'est que ce n'est pas à l'association à aller voir le prof. C'est le maire. Si le maire détient les moyens, celui qui détient les moyens financiers sociaux, si celui qui finance, c'est-à-dire la fondation ou le maire, ou la région ou le préfet, peu importe, n'oblige pas les acteurs sociaux, associations et enseignants à travailler ensemble et à se fixer des objectifs de réussite scolaire, c'est-à-dire vraiment scolaire, pas seulement éducatif au sens large, alors on ne peut pas avoir une dynamique suffisamment organisée et productive. Donc je vais m'en tenir là, le mot de la fin. Le mot de la fin dans le cadre de la Fondation, je pense il faut se donner une ambition transformatrice quand on est une fondation. Ce n'est pas choquant, et même c'est précieux de se dire qu'on peut avoir une influence. C'est même plutôt utile. La seule question, à mon sens, c'est une influence, pourquoi faire ? Se poser en permanence la question de l'objectif de l'influence du programme. Avec qui ? C'est-à-dire influencer seul, c'est catastrophique, parce que si toutes les fondations, et c'est ça qui est en train de se passer en France aujourd'hui, commencent à avancer de manière séparée. Dit autrement, si on a 10 fondations qui s'entendent bien et qui disent « Allez, on va tout ensemble influencer le ministre », est-ce efficace ? Est-ce efficace ? Comment un ministère gère ça ? Et la troisième chose, je pense qu'il ne faut pas se tromper de niveau d'intervention et de niveau de négociation. Et je finis là-dessus. Pour moi, on a une question à se poser sur la légitimité des fondations comme intervenant dans le champ de la sphère publique, sur un sujet aussi public, aussi porté par l'acteur public. Je me suis posé 2 questions. On était en conflit sur le projet de l'île Saint-Denis. On s'est retrouvé en conflit ouvert et destructeur entre la mairie et les enseignants. On avait une chercheuse, on travaille avec un tiers du budget, des 500 000 €, c'est pour financer une chercheuse de l'université de Louvain qui accompagne la démarche. La question, c'est quelle est la posture de la fondation dans le conflit ? Ils nous ont pris comme... D'abord, ils nous ont rejetés, parce qu'on était une fondation. D'abord, les enseignants nous ont rejetés. Mais la mairie aussi, en fait. La mairie, elle a pris notre argent, mais elle disait quand même, une fondation, attention, c'est pas Coca-Cola, parce qu'on est un groupe politiquement correct, paritaire, mutualiste. Mais attention, si on ouvre la porte à une fondation, après, on est foutu. Donc, il y avait un phénomène de défiance vis-à-vis de la fondation. Et des fondations en général. Mais dès lors qu'ils ont été en conflit entre eux, ils nous ont utilisés comme médiateurs. Et là, la question c'est, on était du coup, on a eu beaucoup de pouvoir à ce moment-là. Et on a un pouvoir très fort. La question c'est, est-ce que j'exerce ce pouvoir quand tous les acteurs ne peuvent plus se parler, ne savent plus s'organiser, quand l'acteur public est déficient, qu'il soit éducatif ou local ? Est-ce que la fondation doit prendre le relais, utiliser cette fragilité pour mettre en place le système de management au niveau local ? Surtout qu'on avait réuni toutes les conditions pour que les enseignants soient en confiance, ou est-ce qu'elle doit s'empêcher de le faire parce que ce n'est pas son rôle et que c'est une démarche de court terme ? Ça, c'est une question que je n'ai pas encore résolue. Et ça, dans l'analyse du projet et dans ce qu'on partage au Centre français, c'est vraiment des fondations, c'est vraiment ces questions-là. Jusqu'où allons-nous dans la responsabilité et le rôle que s'octroie la Fondation sur ces projets multi-parties prenantes et dans des secteurs extrêmement dominés, et pour de bonnes raisons. Hein, les mots sont forts, mais n'y voyez aucune espèce de jugement, dominés factuellement par l'action publique. Voilà. Jusqu'où allons-nous? Je pense que c'est à nous de traiter le sujet et ne surtout pas le laisser traiter par les autres.
Megan, can you join us? I think we will now take questions for both or either Megan or Delphine. Same rule, raise your hand, please say your name, and the floor is yours now for a few minutes. Yep.
Hi, I'm Alice. Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I have a question for you, Megan. So I tend to think that in a democracy, the more voices are heard, the better. And especially in the US, where big corporations have strong lobbying influence, it might be good to have foundations with a social and environmental agenda influence policy. But my concern with the foundations that you presented is that they are led by people who have been very successful and who are very wealthy. So people for whom inherently the system has worked. And so I'm wondering if there has been some analysis on the policies that they influence and the way they influence it. Does it tend to maintain the status quo, or is it really transformative policies that they're pushing forward?
I'm jumping in because I want to build on your question. Thank you to the two of you for really interesting contributions. And it's a question to the two of you that builds on this, which is, to what extent is this notion of, what role foundations can have also to be addressed, taking into account who's actually behind the foundation. There were striking differences in your sample, Megan, with two foundations where the founders were still there, they were living and they were running the foundations, as opposed to these two that were older ones. In your case, Delphine, you're a mutualist group, and you're already representing somehow a collective. So to what extent actually the profile of the foundation changes the role that it can or should have in society?
Wants to go first, Megan, maybe?
Okay, so I'll start over here. The transformative practices. I mean, it's such a good question. And in the literature on foundations and policy, there's a lot of skepticism about the extent to which foundations pursue incremental changes or very transformative, like you said. And, it's really interesting. The broad consensus is that there's one school of thought called more resource mobilization, that foundations can really push forward social movements, give them a lot of resources, give them a more national scope. And then there's a lot of critical literature that says foundations actually channel social movements into more moderate goals. They kind of co-opt them sometimes and make them less radical. I'd say it's a really interesting time to be asking that question too, because since Donald Trump, or he who shall not be named, was elected president, everything has changed. I think it's really raised a bunch of questions in the US about inequity, about racism and structural racism that US people were not addressing on the surface prior to this. And I think foundations have been really forced to examine their core beliefs and decide, does it make sense that we're doing what we were doing before? Or do we really need to marshal our resources towards, saving the democracy? So I think in general, I think foundations are undergoing a real shift right now in terms of how they're thinking about that, with a lot of pressure from the public who are very much questioning foundations' role in influencing policy, especially given that they get a tax deduction. So it's essentially the US Treasury paying for at least a third of what their contributions are doing. I should also say I think until the last couple of years, the dominant narrative around education in the US is that it's a horrible system and it's really, really bad. And, we're always getting the worst scores on the international tests. But that's actually a false narrative. People are beginning to realize more and more that it's not the schools themselves that are a problem, because they're actually pretty good for a very diverse country with significant, history of structural racism and these sorts of problems. It's that poverty is the problem, that schools can't fix, 5 years of issues having to do with the child's upbringing, family, neighborhood, all of these different things. So I think that's a conversation that's really happening as we speak. And to your point on Claire, I think what I discovered in my research was that the values of the benefactors are very much imprinted within the institutional DNA of the foundations. So, that manifests in different ways. And people would talk about, it's just in our DNA. Like, all the people who work at Ford would only work here. They wouldn't work anywhere else because we're so committed to social justice. At Kellogg, they had, they would all have a copy of what they called the Children's Charter, which was the original words of W.K. Kellogg about, we're going to save the children. At Gates and Broad, it's a Silicon Valley venture capital words. They're calling things investments, these sorts of things. So, and, there's an imprinting hypothesis, as you know, in sociology, that whatever's there at the founding persists even 100 years later. So I think these are all, corporate titans who founded these organizations. They have different values in terms of how they go about doing it, I think often based on the context or the decade in which they were founded. I also don't think it's inconceivable that there could be a second imprinting in the context of such a new and different national conversation. So I think it remains to be seen. I hope that answers. Yeah.
Peut-être sur la gouvernance des fondations. Alors en France, on a tout procède par la loi et on a une loi qui est très bien faite et qui est très bien faite sur le champ des fondations. Les fondations sont structurées et il y a un principe fondamental. Il y a deux choses importantes à avoir en tête. La fondation est le seul acteur privé qui, par la loi, est réputé pouvoir intervenir et intervient strictement dans le domaine de l'intérêt général. Le seul acteur privé qui, par la loi, intervient dans le domaine de l'intérêt général. Ça, c'est la première chose. Et pour garantir cette spécificité, pour organiser une forme de régulation par l'outil fondation, qui est un outil juridique, le législateur dit un tiers au moins des administrateurs, des members of the board, doivent être extérieurs à l'entreprise ou à la famille qui a fondé la fondation. Parce qu'en fait, leur rôle, leur mission, c'est de garantir l'indépendance de la fondation par rapport au fondateur, d'une part, et de veiller à ce que les sujets d'intérêt général, que la dimension d'intérêt général soit strictement respectée. Mais il faut prendre la loi au sérieux. Et il faut aller plus loin par rapport à l'esprit de la loi. Il faut se dire, ces personnalités qualifiées, c'est une force. C'est vraiment une force. Et il faut aller très loin. Il faut choisir des personnalités qualifiées, compétentes par rapport au sujet que l'on veut traiter. Parce que le réflexe, c'est je vais prendre des personnalités qualifiées qui sont des stars connues du monde entier, parce qu'elles vont apporter une espèce de supplément de valeur à la fondation. Nous, on n'a pas fait ça. On avait effectivement des fondateurs représentant les assurés, mutualistes, les syndicats. On a les syndicats, les représentants des assurés et les organisations patronales qui gouvernent les deux gros collèges de la fondation. Mais bien sûr, ça c'est le peuple. Quelque part, ce sont des représentants de notre peuple. Notre peuple, ce sont les assurés. Et c'est démocratique, mais ça ne suffit pas. Si les décisions de ces fondateurs ne sont pas éclairées par des gens qui connaissent bien, donc des techniciens, des gens qui ont des chercheurs, des gens qui ont été des hauts fonctionnaires. Donc on a choisi parmi les personnalités qualifiées 2 ou 3 hauts fonctionnaires, anciens hauts fonctionnaires, plus en exercice, qui connaissaient parfaitement les politiques de la ville, l'organisation administrative du pays, au niveau national et local, l'éducation. Claude Tello, que j'ai cité tout à l'heure, c'est notre chef de file éducation. et etc., etc., pour chaque thème. Et si vous ne voulez pas avoir un conseil d'administration de 33 membres, parce que franchement c'est l'enfer 33 membres, donc on a fait 2 comités, ça s'organise très bien, hein. Je peux vous expliquer, il y a des choses qui ont l'air d'être des usines à gaz qui en fait au quotidien fonctionnent très bien. On peut avoir des instances lourdes si on les fait travailler, enfin s'il y a une vraie méthode d'animation. Mais néanmoins, et c'était la question que je voulais poser sur la Gates Foundation, comment intègre-t-il dans l'organisation de la Fondation des chercheurs, des intellectuels, des gens qui ont de l'expérience terrain? Comment documente-t-il leurs décisions? Qui compose en fait ce qui compte le plus dans une fondation? Les gens qui agissent, qui analysent, qui suivent les dossiers. Voilà. Et là, il faudrait comparer tous les éléments en fait, de la gouvernance entre les deux catégories que tu as citées. Ce serait vraiment intéressant. Moi, je me dis, les Gates ne sont pas cyniques. Je pense vraiment que ce sont des freshers. Je pense que, pour une part, ils n'ont peut-être pas encore appris leur métier. Enfin voilà, il faut du temps. Il faut du temps pour apprendre ce métier. Le métier de grant makers est un métier difficile. Ne croyez pas qu'il soit facile de distribuer de l'argent. C'est la chose la plus difficile au monde. Je préférais en chercher. Je vous le dis franchement, c'était plus facile avant. Je savais pourquoi je cherchais de l'argent. Distribuer de l'argent, dire non 90% du temps est la chose la plus difficile au monde. Je voudrais finir sur un petit truc. Les fondations peut-être influencent les politiques, mais les politiques utilisent les fondations. Et là, il faudrait regarder, en bande sociologue, les effets des jeux d'acteurs qui s'organisent, parce que l'influence, elle va dans les deux sens. D'où la gouvernance très puissante dont doit se doter une fondation, si elle ne veut pas être instrumentalisée.
Non, je comprends.
We have about 5 minutes left. If somebody has not spoken yet and wants to ask a question, yes, madam.
Yes, thank you, because I'm late because of the traffic, but I just would like still... Oh, okay. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. Yeah, because I think I just want to take this opportunity to share something important and want to have your interpretations or your understandings. Because I think now the world is really in it's a dramatic, maybe a historical moment. If we can see in Europe, in US, and how in this historic, unique period, how led the foundations to just really, as you shared, to influence the public policies or even give some positive influence in the society. I think there's 2 main issues that really helps. If you see how can you or the foundations can work with that. One is how to help the world to improve the morality, because that means change people's heart, because this is the main issue to all social problems and conflicts. The other is because there's a very shocking book which is just newly published. The title of this book is How the Spectre of Communism is Ruling the World. And I think in U.S., one of the former congressmen who made 2 films which have won the documentary award, that's the title of the documentary is Agenda 1, Agenda 2. Then you can see how the communists systematically influence the education in all fields of society. So this is the 2 actually key issues which can help to change the world fundamentally. My question is just how can the foundation help to solve these 2 problems? That means how can you making the joint effort to solve these key issues which can really help for the society's positive change? Thank you.
Would you like to answer that?
Complicated question. I think the important thing that I tend to think about foundations and influence is that every foundation is an expression of the private individual views and values of the benefactor. So what you think might be a problem, someone else might think is a good thing. And so I think that is an important ethical and normative issue to address. You know, if I am on board with the Gates Foundation changing the political economy of the U.S. education, they're a progressive foundation. They tend to want more civil rights and equity. I also have to be comfortable with the conservative foundations advocating against that, advocating against racial equity, advocating for less safety net from the state. So I think we get into a dangerous situation where we have a uniform view of the public good. I think the value out of foundations is that they can put out their preferred models, again, of social order, but that they're not the state. They don't have the power to determine what it is for everyone. So I think having their own visions of the public good, marshaling their resources towards those goods, but also realizing that there's other people who are doing the opposite, and that that's healthy in a pluralistic civil society. I don't know if you want to add.
I agree completely with what you're saying. We need to accept the idea that a foundation is free, and a private actor, a citoyen, a citizen, a teacher, a foundation, an association, we are free. People are free. So the basis of democracy is the freedom. So, and it's even true in France. Even if we are very organized by the law, and specifically, law is very important to organize that. You're speaking about communism. That was yesterday. Today, people are talking about Islamism being into American university, or like being, you know, we can understand so many things at the moment. So the question for a foundation, I think, is let's keep concentrate on the job you have to do. I mean, I think at the point you are addressing question to the foundation, which should be addressed to the representative of the people, elected by the people, meaning either the state or local authorities, I don't know. If a foundation has the power, and especially when you look at the biggest foundation in the US, they have the power, they have the means, they can do whatever they want, if they want to do it. The question is the legitimacy for doing it. And first of all, if you look at the French educational system, it's 800,000 teachers. It's the first employers of the country. You take the private sector, they don't have, I don't know a company, yes, what, 1 million people in operating in France? No, there is no company with 1 million of people. And it's not too much. It is not too much. That's the worst in the story. It's not too much. We are missing people somewhere. So I think really we need to, maybe the foundation could help. This is maybe my utopia. My utopia is that foundations are good captors, observatories, like other members of the civil society. I think we have some sort of political mission if we consider that we can't represent the people, but we can maybe enlighten, bring out enseignement, bring out stories, tell to the people, to the representatives of the people and the technicians, well, look, I heard that, I saw that, maybe it could help. And this is why I think there is a responsibility with the foundations who just work with the head of the hierarchy in the educational system, meaning the minister and the rector d'académie. We don't care about that. They are not education. They are not the big part of the story. So, and when a minister arrives, we are very lucky, because at the moment the minister is not a politic. He was the best worker of the minister. He knew the whole minister from the inside. So this is very important. When he arrived at the post, he knew everything. He knew everything. He knew all the system from the heart. So that's very easy. But sometimes a foundation could help the minister to say, oh, okay, listen to the civil servants. We have met incredible civil servants in your ministry. They can tell you what we are unable to tell. We can look at people. We can help to show the talent, the skillful people, the people who have something to say. And the minister is so alone, so so alone. He doesn't have time. He's run by communication. As soon as he's got to the office, he's finished. I mean, he's finished. He just can't do anything. So foundation should get this responsibility to be like passeur, like, you know, like we have a permanence. I mean, the good thing with democracy is that you change the people who's at the office. The good thing with non-democratic organizations like us is that we have our own agenda of time. So we remain. So we can be part of we keep the memory. And that's why I think we should act collectively. And this is a French who's speaking. I mean, in France, we did not speak a lot about civil society 20 years ago. It's very new. The power of civil society has become at the agenda, which is very new. It's so new. The question, the thing is that we are unable to organize that strength, that power of the civil society, the political power of civil society. But the political power means a huge responsibility, huge responsibility. And about the people, I think that never forget, you were speaking about poverty, the biggest problem is the middle class, the middle classes in our country. And that nobody works on that. And especially the foundations, they don't work on the middle class because the middle class is the middle class. So we need to look at des effets de nos politiques publiques et privées on the middle classes. So that's one of the points we should, and this is one part of the answer to your question.
So I will thank you again, both of you, Delphine and Megan, for this talk. Delphine et Megan sont là quelques minutes si vous voulez leur dire un mot, elles sont à votre disposition. Je vous remercie encore de votre présence. On vous tient au courant pour le prochain Lunch and Learn, même formule. Merci à tous et puis à très bientôt. Bonne fin de journée.